Carried. Thank you. So now moving to item 8, Capital Project Performance Report. So Ruth, welcome to the table. Thank you for the report. And if there are any introductory remarks that you'd like to make, and as we have in previous months, just including any commentary on supply line, cost escalation, those sort of issues as well.
Great, thanks. Good morning, everybody. So Capital Project Performance Report, this is data as of the end of September. I'd just like to start with providing some responses to some of the queries that we had last month on the committee. So last month we had a request for additional information around our CRAF program. So we've provided a little bit more information around those area improvements and how they're progressing in the consultation phase. That's in the external funded report. And then further information around the smaller packages of work within the Road Safety Priority Project will be provided at the next UDAT committee. As we draw down funds within those area improvements, you will get visibility of those projects in this report. In terms of the action item that we had with KiwiRail, the letter has been sent, we've received a response, and we did hold a meeting yesterday between Council and KiwiRail and have made some progress. So we're going to be having meetings on a more regular basis with management from both KiwiRail and Council, and we will be monitoring the outputs that are required both short and long term across the program. We did also highlight the importance in delivering our government funded shovel-ready projects and the dependency that we have on them in order to deliver those projects. So it's important to note, I will talk about supply chain risks and issues and cost escalations in terms of our council impacts, but KiwiRail are also experiencing those impacts, and that also includes skilled resources and being able to maintain and attract them. So in terms of the current forecast to 30th of June, we are forecasting a delivery of 98%, including external funded, that's sitting at 99% delivery against budget. This month, we have provided a graph, this is on page 35, that shows our current progress towards the committed budget of 486 million against how we've seen spend in previous years. So you'll see the green line there on page 35 shows that we're in a similar position to financial year 21. We spent 394 million in financial year 21. However, given the increased budget that we have this year, we need to be ahead of where we were last year. So we'll get the delivery units to speak to deliverability shortly. Firstly, I'll just talk to some of the overall program impacts and the risks and issues in relation to COVID. So last month we had a request from elected members for additional information. Impacts from COVID are from page 69 in the report, and there has been some updates since that report. So in terms of cost, we now have confirmation that we are expecting 63 variations against the 110 projects that were mobilised prior to COVID. To date, we've got 41 of those claims, and we've finalised 20 of them. So at the moment, our project managers are saying that we'll be able to absorb those additional costs within the current approved budgets per project, but we don't have enough information yet to say that that's across the board. So the detail of the claims are commercially sensitive, so the detail will not be in this report, but I will provide you a view of this at a high level in future months. In terms of time impacts, we're centralising the information across our whole capital program around whether or not the delivery dates have been impacted by the 3-week lockdown, and will provide visibility to the committee, as we did last time we had COVID, in future reports. In terms of supply chain and cost escalation risks and issues, our program is and will continue to be impacted by these. In addition, there is a risk in retention and recruitment of skilled staff because of the current climate. All of these issues do mean that we may deliver less and our projects may cost more to deliver. So last month, as Councillor Turner said, we did commit to providing you an update on this on a monthly basis. So I'll speak generally to the capital program, and then I've got Jane in the room who'll be able to provide an overview of what central government is doing to address the issue. So current issues being experienced are not going to go away anytime soon. The industry is predicting that this is going to last for another 12 to 18 months. We are also moving into a peak time for shipping, which is from November to March, and the expectation is that demand is going to increase by 18% from what we saw last year. So at a summary level, our capital teams are mitigating the risks and issues at both a project but also at a program level. At a program level, in summary, we are reviewing the upcoming pipeline of work, purchasing equipment and supplies in advance, and providing contractors a view of our forward works. At a project level, we are ordering early, purchasing by council and novating to the contract where possible, and maintaining close communication with the supply market. We are also rephasing work within projects so that we may not be able necessarily have to impact the overall completion date. So visibility of the current program and the projects that are currently being impacted within your report from pages 72 to 80, and there's an update from what we provided last month. Those projects are shaded in yellow. Is Jane in the room? Welcome.
Hello.
Oh, I won't pull it out from under here. So Jane's going to provide an update on what central government are doing to address the current issues in relation to supply chain and cost escalation.
Morning. So Ruth's already really given a great overview in terms of what's going on from a council perspective and the mitigation that we've got in place, which is very similar to what we spoke to last month, and that mitigation for the best part as much as possible is working for us. The major issues globally are still the shipping cost, the lead time, the congestion in ports, the consumer and buying habits are causing issues with supply and demand, and there is a major labour shortage, and I think we feel that probably more than most. From a government perspective, which is what I promised to provide you from last month, we've done some discussions. We've looked at some information. We've managed to obtain what's going on and what the government, or central government, are trying to do to support the issue. Primarily, their reach goes to helping with logistics and freight. So that's really where they can have an impact to support us, and so that's what they focused on. So in May 20, there was a scheme called the Ministry of Transport implemented the International Air Freight Capacity Scheme, which is they call the IAFC, to support the transport of goods that had been significantly affected by the loss of movement from passenger aircraft. The scheme was intended to enable transport of essential imports, such as medical equipment or high-value exports. There was 372 million allocated, and that was part of a wider 600 million aviation support package. The funding was provided to airlines and other aviation carriers on contracts to guarantee flights and increase air freight capacity. The scheme acted as a subsidiary to reduce the high costs of freight brought on by the lack of passenger air travel. So that scheme actually delivered $13.5 billion worth of air freight, and it was carried through that scheme. Under the scheme, importers and exporters were required to pay for their freight on a commercial basis. So that scheme is mostly ended, and it's been replaced with something called Maintaining International Air Connectivity Scheme, so they call that the IMAC. So that scheme was very closely connected to how the first scheme was created. That scheme was commenced in March 21 and is expected to continue to March 22. There was 195 million in funding allocated, and that's administered by the Ministry of Transport. All potential air services, including airlines and cargo carriers, were invited to submit proposals to receive funding under the scheme to guarantee air freight routes. So that's really to support them being able to get, obviously, materials and equipment to the country. Another scheme that's been created is the Essential Transport Connectivity Scheme, so the ETC they call that. This provides supports to air, land and marine transport. It's to provide short and medium term capacity for regional connectivity and essential services. This again is administered by the Ministry of Transport. The scheme began in May 20, is expected to conclude in June 22, obviously depending on passenger transport recovery and how that actually goes. Central government allocated 30 million to this scheme for aviation activities as part of the wider 600 million aviation relief package, and a further 20 million was allocated to non-aviation initiatives such as land and marine transport. NZ Trade and Enterprise is also supported, so they've created a supply chain review service for their customers with external expert advice available to them on how to manage their supply chains, essentially trying to help them where they're heavily reliant on international trade and where they're trying to help businesses source substitutes, which obviously will have a knock-on effect and help us with our programme. In May 20, trade and investment ministers across several countries, including New Zealand, made a joint commitment to overcome supply chain disruption. The statement acknowledged the need to avoid importing trade controls, such as tariffs, that may restrict the flow of exports. The statement encouraged measures such as increasing the efficiency of customer processes, safeguarding logistical connections of goods for transport, and refraining from trade restrictions on essential goods. The statement does not stipulate funding or a timeline, but it's thought that the bilateral relations will likely support the flow of goods and services into New Zealand. And finally, Council has been heavily involved in a supply relationship management scheme run by MB. That was already initiated before COVID really took hold, but essentially a lot of the conversation and topic which is being taken up to central government from local government is about this constant issue we've got to keep our eye on, essentially, so that they're talking about how they can keep mitigating the issue. And that's critically important to us because COVID is not the only reason supply chain has struggled. COVID has essentially tipped the supply chain over. So what we're seeing is a change that will change between now and the next 12 and 18 months. And in that time, we have to really sit and watch to see what the new normal looks like, so our mitigation can continue to change and evolve to the point that then in 18 months' time, this is how it's going to look, so this is how we're going to need to continue to work. So I think that's probably important to note at this stage. And we're seeing some really, really positive steps by our business units, certainly around how we design. Do we worry about materials at design? Are we going out for early packages, etc.? So I think it's hurting us a little bit. For the best part, I think that's absolutely the best thing we can do. And I think our supply chain relationships now are the most important thing to us and will continue to be. So that's where we are.
Do we want to ask any questions of Jane at this point?
All right, so yeah, are there any questions for Jane? Yanni?
Yeah, thank you. And I guess at a higher level, I guess the question I wanted to ask is, have you identified any projects that we should actually just not proceed with because of the risk of the materials and the increased cost?
I think I'd have to.
Yeah, so we monitor the risk on all of the projects frequently, so our business units are across that, and we have steering groups where we're looking at that as well. So where there is increased cost and it makes no sense to do it anymore, we would definitely consider that. To date, there hasn't been a situation where we've needed to make that decision.
Right. So just in regards to the materials, are we looking at a high level of more locally sustainable materials, and when are we likely to get any sort of indication on that?
As part of the full design processes, everything's looked at anyway. So what the most important thing at this time is that COVID's now in the pot. So one of the first things that when we consider design that's considered is materials. Are we going to be able to obtain them? What's alternative? What's the lead time? And when you think about lead time, naturally local is going to be a shorter lead time unless the pressure and demand has caused the local to have such a workload they can't meet our demand. So there's a few questions that we ask at that stage, which and local goes in the pot there in terms of, is that best for us? So if that makes sense, it's part of the wider decision, because local might not necessarily be possible, they might not be able to service us, but we look at that at design stage at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further? Aaron?
Yeah, so with monitoring cost increases and freight and so on and so forth, it keeps going up, and is there a point where we and other councils and government start to look at prioritising the spend for an amount of time to take the heat out of the market, because it's driving inflation? It's a global issue as well, but when more and more governments keep announcing massive spends, you've got more people trying to buy the same number of items. It only ever does one thing: those items go up. It's essentially almost a global Dutch auction.
Yeah.
So at what point do we kind of go, you know what, we're going to have to just put the brakes on a few projects, because there's the old saying that it's never cheaper to build now. It's also a saying it's never more expensive to build now, because you're buying at peak. At what point does that happen?
That's a big question.
Or does it not happen? We just put the rates
It's
up?
a big question, and I guess that would be a central government and local government initiative, because if we were to, let's say, hold our programme, is the Ministry of Education going to hold their programme? Are we going to prioritise from a central government perspective as opposed from a local government up? So in terms of answering your question around how we, and you're right, that is the supply and demand issue, that would have to be a collaborative relationship at sort of central and local government rather than just us deciding to do it, because essentially all that will happen there is we will suffer. That's the issue.
So what do you mean we'll suffer?
Well, if we hold our programme and no one else does, we're now behind in our programme, and how are we going to catch up if we've still got this issue in front of us because nobody else is holding their programme or not doing what's essential, if that
But
makes sense.
someone must look at it economically and go, there's a point where you just can't afford it anymore, and you create hyperinflation.
Yeah.
And then we're putting up rates at exorbitant amounts because you have to pay those bills or borrow more money. I mean, it's
All right, so is there an answer to the question from staff? I mean, you know, you've acknowledged the question, you've provided an answer. Is there any further comment from staff on the matter that Aaron's raised?
I mean, the comment is maybe that's another council debate to have in terms of how you'd want to work with other councils, etc., and to try and mitigate the issue, and not necessarily a decision we could make for you because we would impact in the programme that you've asked us to deliver,
Yeah,
essentially.
I mean, the starting point is that we're delivering the programme.
Yes.
If you were coming to us with recommendations to do other than that for good reason, they're obviously recommendations that we would consider.
Yes.
But what you're suggesting is that that would need to be wider than just our own conversation.
Yes.
It would need to be other councils and government
Absolutely.
agencies as well.
The big spenders in the market, basically,
Yep.
is what you want.
Yep.
I think we can do some more work in terms of what the impact currently is within our program and where the cost escalation actually sits, because the size of the issue in terms of the program is not visible at present.
Yeah, I mean, this is a live issue and it's the reason we've asked for updates on it monthly. And I think if there was any further thinking that you wanted to bring back on any of the matters that have been raised in this meeting to the next meeting, if that was appropriate, that would be good. I mean, I'm confident that you're keeping an eye on all of these issues, and if there was anything you were wanting from us by way of guidance or decision making, you would be coming with those questions to us. As long as we're working in that environment, then we're in a good space.
Yeah, and I think it's important to acknowledge the economics in the industry globally are saying there will be a normalisation in 12 to 18 months. So we will see what it looks like going forward, and I think that's probably an important point. It won't continue going up forever.
Yeah, and in the current environment, defining what normalisation looks like is increasingly difficult
Tough,
as well.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, other further questions? Phil?
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. With going forward in here, just so I'm clear, it says about the 47 in Three Waters, how the Littleton Harbour wastewater scheme. I thought that was done, and we there was only a little bit to join up to get the wastewater. It was all done through the harbour and to pumping stations and stuff like that, but. It's just about every month we're we're spending about $1 million on it, but I thought it was nearly done.
So the completion date for Littleton is at the end of June, and the biggest spenders in the construction phase, which is what we're in right now. So you can get a more detailed update from someone in the room around Three Waters. When Helen's up at the bench, I'll get her to answer that.
Yeah, cool.
All right, so just in terms of process, I mean, given that Phil's asked the question, Helen, do you want to raise that now? But what we were looking at was questions specifically for Jane.
Oh, sorry.
And then as we get the managers up, we'll look at those areas. So actually, Helen, you might want to just address the matter that Phil's raised when you speak to your item when you come up.
Sorry.
That would be best. Thank you. So moving on, are there any other questions for Jane on the matters that she's raised or areas of her work before we move on? Okay, Jane, thank you very much indeed. So, Ruth, now take us to the next part.
Excellent. So we'll talk about deliverability by unit now. So our current forecast on page 43. So just in terms of accuracy of forecasting to date, this year we are at 95%. So we have spent 95% of what we've forecast, which is excellent so far. There are, however, some big months forecast for the future, which you can see on page 43. So we'll bring up Lynette first in terms of transport. So they're forecasting 164 against a budget of 144. In financial year 21, they delivered 141.
What did you want to talk about? Sorry.
Deliverability. How are you
Okay,
going to do it?
thank you. Sorry, it's been one of those mornings. How are we going to do that? So we are running our program very much this year, very much the way we ran it last year. We are over anticipating, expecting things to go wrong through the year, so we are over forecasting at the moment. I do anticipate that will come back closer to the budget by the end of the year. We have a number of, as I've talked to you before, we have a number of very big contracts out in the market, bombing along at the moment and actually making really good progress. Marshland Bridge, and the intersection associated with that. We have just let Coastal Pathway, which will get cranking as soon as we can. And we have a couple of very big cycleways that are moving very quickly and making good progress. So that is what's keeping spend up, which is different to what it was at the start of this phase of the LTP last time round.
Great, thank you. So you're happy to take any questions on the transport area? Okay, nobody's signalling questions, so you might be off the hook. Great, thank you very much. Thank you.
Helen, so for Three Waters, currently forecasting 176 against 203.
Good morning, welcome to the table.
This is Mark.
Yeah, so the current forecast for this financial year, we're forecasting 175 million. I think it was 213 was the original budget. We're struggling with resourcing in the current area, which is impacting us. We've lost a few staff leave the organisation, so we're a little bit behind where we would like to have been. We've had a few interruptions, of course, with COVID, but we're starting to recover back from some of that. But we're signaling a $175 million delivery at this stage, so quite a bit of a carry forward into financial year 23 or beyond.
Thank you. So Phil had got the question that he raised about Littleton in particular. So do you want to respond to that first, and then we'll take any other questions?
Yep, so the Littleton wastewater scheme, the last part of that scheme involves the connection down through the tunnel down to PS15, and that's the bit part of the work which is underway. That entire scheme, there's several portions of that scheme.
So that's through the tunnel that you're talking about?
Yeah, from the exit of the tunnel down to that connection.
Yeah, I knew there was one bit missing, but I thought it was sort of just from the tunnel, out of the tunnel, just joining a bit up, but that's where the cost is, in the tunnel.
It is, so there's a number of components of the overall scheme.
Okay.
They've been commissioned. We've got a number of the treatment plants which have now been converted to pump stations.
Yep, saw that, and all the pipes in the harbour are done and all that sort of thing, but so that's where that dollar value is.
So the final, if you like, the construction aspects are the tunnel, which is remaining, the pipe from the tunnel, to the PS15, which is the thermal station. Thank you. And then there's the final commissioning of the entire scheme.
Yep. Now, there's one more question, if you don't mind.
Yep, absolutely, thank you.
With what happened in the paper early on in the week when we're talking about how many leaks we've got in our water system, why should we get all our contractors to go and do leaks and not worry about, we are changing pipes. I drive down Graham's Road every day and the guys are replacing a pipe, which is cool, it needs replacing, and they're doing a lovely job at night time and all that sort of thing, but it's not leaking. I know it's at the end of its life, but should we be concentrating on where the leaks are coming from, because that's the bottleneck or pinch point or the bit that the public are worried about?
The leaks are, which you see visibly, are very minor leaks. Okay, there may be quite a number of them, but it's minor in the scheme of things, and it would absorb a number of contracting resource, maintenance contracts, to run around chase after these leaks. We are addressing them, don't get me wrong, but in the scheme of things, its contribution to the overall leakage rate is quite minor. The biggest wins to be had are in addressing the actual pipe, targeting the pipe renewals.
Okay.
So that's where the focus is.
With just a sort of a tongue-in-cheek thing, with what happened yesterday, should we be doing any work on our water pipes? And it's like putting a new motor in your car before someone comes and flogs it. Should we should we be spending any money on things like that? Be
So I'll
quiet.
take that one.
Good.
We have responsibility for the next 3 years for
Right.
the three waters, and we need to ensure that we are delivering.
Phil, you're assuming they get it over the line.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right, thank you. Sarah.
Thanks for that. I'm just sort of following on from Phil's point there about what was reported in the paper, and it was reported that we were saying that funding was an issue for getting everything back up to scratch. But when we went through the long-term plan process, through the workshops and bits and pieces, we were clear that we were willing to put on as much as we could deliver when it came to the funding. And so at one point through that process, we added an extra $30 million because we were told that we could deliver an extra $30 million worth of water infrastructure improvements. But that was as much as we could deliver rather than funding being a constraint. And I know I, for one, would have put more funding on if we were told we could deliver more in the way of water infrastructure. So where does that sit?
So so it takes time to step up our delivery, and
Yeah.
we are stepping up our delivery. So last year we spent around 150 million in
Yeah.
three waters. We're stepping up this year, and we need to step up to about 250 million per year
Yeah.
to get on top of the backlog of renewals
Yeah.
and to cope with growth and improvement works.
Yeah.
So that is stepping up with
Yeah.
time. I have to say that COVID lockdowns are not helping
Yeah.
that step up. Nor are the materials shortages, and nor are the skilled people that
No.
we need helping.
Yeah.
So the lockdown and the lack of ability to recruit from overseas is hitting the whole sector. So not just within council, but our contractors and our consultants, all of the people who do the design work. So at the moment we're facing a number of constraints in stepping up,
Yeah.
but we are stepping up as much as we can and as quickly as we can. But you'll remember from the long-term plan discussions that getting on top of that leakage rate is a long game.
Oh,
It's not a
absolutely.
short game. So it will take us a number of years to get in front of those renewals
Yeah.
and to start turning those figures around. The other thing that we are doing though is we're upgrading our meters across the city, and it might be pertinent to, especially given the question around leaks, it might be pertinent to talk about a particular one last week where we forgave a $53,000 bill on proof of an $800 fix. So there was a major leak. Nobody saw that leak because it was straight into the Waimak gravels that we're built on here. Nobody saw it. There was no sign of the leak on the surface at all. And the first they knew was when they got a massive bill because they were only being read every 6 months. So that $53,000 bill has been forgiven on proof of fixing that leak, which only cost $800. So increasing our meter reading to 3 monthly for all meters across the city for both commercial and private premises is going to help us detect those unseen leaks right across the city on the private side, as well as getting those leaks on the public side. So we are doing everything that we can to get on top of leaks, as well as the renewals program.
But so there's probably potentially a significant amount of the leakage that's reported that actually is in the private systems as well.
That's correct. So it's on
Yeah, yeah.
both the public and the private side. So having the changing our meter reading, particularly across the residentials, from every 2 years to every 3 months, will help us detect those leaks.
Yeah. But just to be clear, that if council had put more budget on in the LTP for the first 3 years of the LTP for the water stuff, could we have delivered more than we're planning to deliver? Because that was the kind of
Not
the
without
implication.
sacrificing something else, no. So what we proposed through those iterative series of workshops was as much as we could deliver.
Yeah, that's great, thanks.
All right, thank you. Pauline.
Further to Sarah's question, do we have a figure on how much of those leaks are private and how much are public?
No, not at the moment, but we will have soon. So we're introducing a number of meters across our network so that we can do a water balance, but we haven't got them all there yet. So that's part of the Smart Water program and the rollout of those additional meters.
Yeah, because currently the finger's been pointed clearly at council for all of it, and now we're being told it's not just us.
Most of it is within the council's network because most of the network is ours, as it were. There is some, though, also at connections and on the private side.
Yeah,
So
I know,
we'll
but the
table
thing
all
is,
of it.
there's the number of leaks, but there's the volume of leaks over time, and some of them on private land, as you just said, have gone unnoticed for several years.
Well, that one would have been for 6 months. But
Well,
yes.
I know one that went unnoticed for a couple of years too.
Yeah, there will
so
be.
that alters the figure, so thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, so that's everything on water. Thanks very much.
And finally, I just want to bring Alistair up to talk about major facilities, especially given Hornby Library and the delays that we've encountered in relation to supply chain on that project.
Where do you want me to start?
Wherever you want.
Morning all.
Morning.
So Hornby in particular has been a concern because of just the fact that we preempted the issue we currently face, which is the delay in steel. And I'll start at the reverse of the email that I've just received from Peter McGibbon, the project manager for the site, because it answers what I'm going to say will answer the question that he's raised and why we preempted this in the first instance. But he says we ordered the steel at the start of May. And as we knew, this would and still will result in an earlier start on the site than if the contractor ordered it after they were appointed. And it's a very clear position we're sat in at the moment, is that a lot of us are preempting the issues before we go into contract. We're taking a risk on board as a council and as a project-led team to try and mitigate delay and all best intent and purposes. We are managing that process really well at the minute, albeit that it's such a very changeable environment. And Ruth and both Jane have really gone through the detail of what the country's trying to do to get over the issue. But on that basis, the steel is in Auckland now. It's due to be shipped on the 30th and then unloaded in Timaru. We have no. I'm just telling you the journey it's on. No, I'm just telling you, Timaru on the 6th of November, with an arrival on site around 13th of November. The biggest issue being that in Timaru it will go through the customs process, which is an unknown process in a very constrained market, in a very constrained port environment that's got only so many resources that can get through these containers in a timely manner. So, we are working so closely with our contractor nailers, and they are absolutely clear and understand the issues that we face. We don't want to. We are holding them in abeyance from going on site, and they are working with us and understand our situation because they know that if they land on site, we'll start paying costs to them for that delay. So they're working with us and working really closely. We know that it takes them a week and a half to 2 weeks to establish on site, and we're talking daily to them at the moment about transition of this material. That's not to say that there isn't work that's being undertaken at the moment, and that is that the contractor, in order to ensure a speedy start on site, has met and engaged all of the key subcontractors. They've done some forward planning on what parts of the program they can accelerate. Their documentation and drawings are beyond where they should be because they want to be at a point where they can issue contracts straight away to all supply chain, and all supply chain are sat in readiness and waiting. So, it's about that closeness to your contractor, to your supply chain, to understand what you can do to mitigate is something that's pretty consistent right across the board for all of our project teams delivering at the moment, from what I can gather. And it's maintaining that relationship is really probably the most important part right now from our perspective, and it takes a lot of time for the teams to do that. So it's just, Hornby's a very small project in essence, but it's got a very tight-knit community trying to get it to the point where it can land on site that doesn't cost us any more money than is necessary at the minute, because we don't want to be paying 8,000 a day delays. So we're working closely. We all understand our contracts, and we all understand what our mitigations are in place. So that's Hornby for you.
Thank you. And keep us updated with that, please, as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So, Alistair, that was everything that you wanted to highlight?
Yep.
So just moving to questions. So, Jimmy, yeah.
Explanation. particular follow the page 69 and 67, those the COVID-19 related cost and also supply chain risk. I'm concerned because those overseas the materials not only for the steel, delivery, because they have some other like a swimming pool and some other the material from Italy, from some other country, etc. Whether there is a moment still uncertainty, so will be further, to delay regarding to this project.
So my point there around entering into contract,
yes,
with the supply chain is part and parcel of their agreement with nailers. It's the commencement on site. It's the start date is the issue. You've got to be able to tell them what the start date is. I appreciate we can't control all of those supply chains, but we're trying to mitigate everything we can at the moment. The appointment of nailers is under is a traditional project, so it's a fixed fee. They understand what that is. There will be variations to the contract, which we have contingency for, but at the minute their responsibility is to supply. So they're working with all their supply chain to try and mitigate and understand every single issue they've got. Mm-hmm. You cannot control how things travel to you. We are at the mercy of. They will give us the best intention at all times, and we will work around that and track that movement of that material coming to site, whether that be the pulls coming from another part of the world or whether it be steel coming from another part of the world. We're trying to do everything we can locally to mitigate that problem, but yeah, there are some elements in supply chain that we require from other parts of the world, and we just have to manage that process.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions for Alistair? Yanni?
Yeah, thank you. Just on page, I don't know if it comes under you. There was two questions I had, and page 85. We're told that that the construction program and completion date is being reviewed monthly by the contractor and Otakaro around Parakarori. But then we're told that the completion date for the main construction work is still to be confirmed. So what's the current forecast for opening of Parakarori?
So John O'Hagan did a presentation last time to the council as a whole. There will be issues against the contract that are in arbitration at the minute that will inform what that end date is. And at the minute, if you refer to any dates or it's a contractual obligation they've got to meet, they're in arbitration at the minute on certain tasks, which is normal process under a contract. So at the minute, the date they've confirmed to us is what it is. We are still waiting for the new revised date.
So is that December 22nd?
Yeah. That's still the date that they're declaring.
Right. Even though there's monthly meetings that are reviewed?
We know, yeah. But it's a contractual obligation that they've got to meet with their CPB, and Otakaro have to work through the arbitration process to agree what the end date is going to be. And there are delays, and delays are continuous at the moment, so they are always going to impact and compound the issue they're faced with under that contract.
So we could say that forecast date is not going to be
delayed.
met. That's
without doubt, it's going to be in delay.
Yeah.
It's just what the date is. They can't tell us yet.
So when are we, even, I appreciate it'll probably change, but is there any idea when we'd likely know what a new forecast completion date would be?
Well, we do, obviously, you know that we sit across the PCGs, the PSGs and the project governance group as well. So we are aware they're in delay. We are aware that they are going through an arbitrary process with the contractor at the moment, arbitration process with the contractor at the minute, and that they will announce the date at some point in time. But we know that there's definitely going to be a delay. We just don't have the exact date.
Have you got a time frame for when arbitration will be concluded?
Well, it's compounded monthly at the minute by delays in the market and materials. So I can say that when we do our next elected member update, I will work hard to define that date. And if I have a defined date in the meantime, I'll do a post-meeting note through the chair to the councillors.
It'd be good to get a sense if it was like months or years.
It won't be years, but
yeah.
All right. As soon as you get more information, if you can update us, and obviously this is going to be an area
Maybe
of
just to get a memo
interest.
around, not, it doesn't need to come as part of the official report, but even if it's just a memo, if the information comes to hand. And then the final question I had was in regards to the Multicultural Recreation and Community Centre. and we don't, I mean, obviously everything's listed as green, but we've got a target delivery date of June 21, no current approved delivery date, no current forecast delivery date, well, it just seems to not kind of be happening. So I don't know if anyone can enlighten us on that.
I can provide some information around the delivery date being the original delivery date and the lack of being a baseline at the moment from a process perspective.
Right.
So the original delivery date is the date that was put in the LTP.
Yeah.
Alistair will speak shortly to why there has been delays from that date.
Yeah.
We don't actually baseline a delivery date until we're past the initiation phase and we've moved into the plan phase. Plan comes after initiate, and in plan we create the project management plan. So until we've got that level of information, we can't baseline a date because we don't know enough in order to provide an estimated date.
But we approved this when did we approve it? Like 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
So in terms of the delay, I will let Alistair speak to that.
Yeah, so it's aligned with, obviously the MCRC is aligned with netball and Netzel, and the Netzel is building is being established on Napunawai at the moment. It's part of a sale and lease agreement, sale and lease agreement between Netball, who own the current netball centre, which is going to be the MCRC, and it's basically to align with the funding stream that transfers across to Netzel, which is 1st of December this year. So the money itself will actually move out of our account into their account at that period of time. So it's a work in progress. It's they're through the resource consent and consent process and are due to establish they're already on site at the moment in MPW at Napunawai.
So 1st of December we pay the money.
Yep.
And acquire the building.
Yep, and then we go through the process to convert what is the netball centre to the MCRC.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Aaron.
Yeah, just quickly, Alistair, on the Metro Sport, the accessible hydroslides, did we get anything back on that question from last month?
Yeah, I think we have had feedback. It came from Craig Hutchins, so I'm just wondering if that should have been sent through to you. I haven't seen the actual memo, but we've definitely had the response back.
Can we check that, and if there is something, can we get it sent around?
Yeah, I can confirm though that there is no. I can say there's no disability access to any slides anywhere in the world currently.
Cool, so we could be world first.
I said that you'd say that.
Well, could always aim for second.
All right, if there's information that's been provided, let's get that sent around.
Sorry, and it was raised by John O'Hagan as well, because he talked about the lift to access it, and that was an expense that could be issued, it could be instructed by council, but it wasn't really viable.
All right, if you've got a memo or written information, let's get it sent around.
I'll find it, because Craig Hutchins has definitely responded, so.
We did raise
fantastic. Thank you.
A family room as well, like a parent room. Not a big one, just like the art gallery's got.
I can confirm that as well, I'll confirm that.
Because, Alistair, the attitude we could take is that if disabled people can't use it, then no one should.
Appreciate it.
Imagine that in an inclusive world.
Yep.
Crazy.
We're trying our best.
Yeah. Wow.
All right, are there further questions for Alistair before we move on? All right, so Alistair, thanks very much indeed, and we look forward to that further information. Ruth, anything further?
2 final comments just around the watch list and a couple of updates around that. So the enabling works for Lancaster Park is nearing completion this financial year. So we've now added the Lancaster Park redevelopment project to the watch list. It was always the intention that that would be added once the enabling works was complete. And then finally, the Barrington Lincoln Whiteley intersection improvement, we've baselined the delivery date for that to October 23. And we're taking advantage of cost savings and reducing the impact of the community by delivering that with the public transport improvements as well as Three Waters. Happy to take any further questions.
All right, thank you. Jimmy.
Just the overall general questions, but because of this time, very good, particularly regarding to your page 69 and the page 70, those the detail, the kind of the criteria, to set out COVID-19 impact, the delivery, and also supply chain risk issue, etc. But some of the projects you have followed this kind of criteria, but some of them I miss out. I didn't see the name. For instance, like Horseway Junction Road, also is kind of consider, the design, consider material, the COVID-19, etc. And also the some of the major cycle route, South Express, particular section 2, 3, etc. Whether have any impact by the COVID-19 and also by all those supply chain, this kind of issue or not. I didn't see in here. Follow this the criteria.
Lynette's left the room. The only response that I've got is, as I mentioned earlier, was that we had this meeting with Kiwi Rail yesterday, and they're also encountering issues and risks in relation to the supply chain and cost escalation. And with that revised information from Kiwi Rail, we'll look to update this for next month.
Okay, yeah. I think probably this criteria will be good. We should every project should be follow this criteria and give us the more detail.
The detail in relation to the projects that are currently impacted is in that attachment. This is the information that we've got from our project managers so far.
Yeah.
If there's a need for further information, Jimmy, further detailed information, maybe that can be taken offline, and Lynette could supply the information, given that we're through the transport questions earlier in the meeting.
Yeah. Okay, I didn't see that. Yeah. And last one also regarding to the major cycle route. Those South Express on, let me have a look at which. On page 87, particularly regarding to the progress update and the risk. In here, the section 2. Particular section 2 is from the Craven Street to Buchanan, but last year the risk comments mentioned the construction at the Waterloo Road near Waterloo Business Park, and is in construction. Actually, that's section 3 rather than section 2. Section 2 is no this section, so they probably made a mistake. Should be revised.
That again, Jimmy, given its transport, might be something to refer through to Lynette. If it's something that needs to be corrected as a matter of detail, I'm sure that can be done.
Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Business, yes.
Tim.
Sorry, Ruth, you mentioned the Whiteley, Barrington, Lincoln Road intersection.
I did.
The issue there, I know Rapporteurs wanted to 4-lane Horsell Road and then it goes through to Lincoln Road, etc. What we've always said was the issue there, if you're looking at a bottleneck, is that intersection, because it's the part of Lincoln Road that goes through the historic Addington Village. So if we could, perhaps the community board could have an update with how that's going, because to be perfectly blunt, it's totally useless to do up the intersection if it hasn't been, if that roadway in the village hasn't been upgraded between Morehouse Ave and that intersection. So
my understanding is that it has been done in conjunction with that.
So, okay, if that could be confirmed, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yes.
Cheers.
Great. Thank you very much. All right, so we've got a recommendation in front of us to receive the information in the report. I'm happy to move that. Sam's happy to second. Is there any discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? That's carried. Thank you very much indeed, Ruth. Thanks to you and to the other presenters for the report, presentations and detailed answers to questions. Thanks very much indeed.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so that brings us to 11:10. So let's now take a break till, if I said 11:20, just a 10-minute break, would that work? Yep, all right, 11:20 in the interest of speed. So let's start back at 11:20 with the rest of the agenda. So we'll adjourn till then. Thank you.
Okay.